Salam world, I'm your shorter than average girl from down under, and today's video is going to be different from what I usually do on this channel. Usually I would pick a movie and analyze its story, but as you see from the thumbnail and this Wednesday's short, we're not doing a movie today, but an entire season of the anime, The Promised Neverland. Now, there's a super important reason for the slight change. This isn't a political challenge, but when it comes to such obvious oppression, pain, and suffering, it's no longer just a political issue. I have made subtle references in previous videos about the events taking place on the other side of the world from me, but after a ceasefire had finally been agreed on by the UN and there was no vetoes, then that ceasefire was refused by one of the parties. I personally couldn't take not speaking more openly about this issue. But what does an anime have to do with this? Well, it's the story. The parallels between the plot of The Promised Neverland and the current events are
uncanny.
So hopefully today we will use the children of Gracefield House to understand the motivations and dreams of the children of. And if you want to help the children of survive through the harsh summer that is now going to come, then you can help with a small donation to Creators for Palestine. I have a link in the descriptions. We're already 2/3 of our $1 million goal to help the children of Gaza. So even a single cent from us here in the other side of the world can contribute majorly to a child's life over there. So please do not doubt your incredible contribution to the cause. But now let's get back to The Promised Neverland. And if you're only here for the anime review, you can step to the timestamp shown on the screen right now or the one in the description, whichever suits you best. But for now, let's talk story. The Promised Neverland is set in the orphanage of Gracefield House. Here, children up to the age of 12 live happily together with Isabella, aka Mum, and sister Krone. They receive plentiful food, a high-quality education, and enough room to play and pursue any hobby that they like. It's a dream. Sounds perfect, right? Well, that's how it appears on the surface. But the truth is, Gracefield House isn't an orphanage. It's a farm. Harvesting humans for demon consumption. And Gracefield Farm produces the highest quality of merchandise, especially the brains. Why? Because they're free range. They have freedom. They get high quality food to consume. They are given everything to then have it taken away from them. Scared yet? Was the world always this way? Unfortunately, this isn't a question that is answered in season 1 of the anime, and given the flop of season 2, it's a question which never gets answered in the anime. But referring to the manga, which are the books that the animes are based on, well, the world wasn't always like that. 1,000 years ago, the world was an absolute chaos, a war between humans and demons. You see, demons receive the intellectual intelligence of whatever they consume. So if they consume animals, their intelligence is that of animals. But if they consume humans, they become more intelligent. So humans became something that the demons desired. And so the humans, defending their own, started this war against them. But then they decided to come to peace. A promise was established between the two sides. The world was going to be split in half. half for the humans to live in peace without the fear of being consumed by monsters, and another half for the monsters to live in peace without the fear of being killed by the humans. But the issue is, demons still require to eat human brains so that they stay intelligent enough to keep the promise. And so humans decided to establish farms in the demon side of the world, which produces human product for the demon's consumption. And so the story is taken from the perspective of these children that grow up in these farms on the demon side of the world. So now that we have context, let's get back to the story at hand. Our protagonists, Emma, Norman, and Ray, the oldest children in Gracefield at 11 years old. Each is blessed with an incredible talent, and they all receive perfect scores on their daily tests, meaning they are priceless because they have really good brains. Norman is the smartest on the farm, a prodigy. Emma has an incredible memory and she can memorize anything perfectly just by hearing it once. And Ray can solve any problem that he is given. Not to mention that he never had infantile amnesia, which means that he actually remembers his birth and the monsters as a babe. His whole life, Ray was preparing himself to survive, to deal with the biggest problem at hand, not being eaten. Over time, he developed a strong relationship and alliance with Isabella, who actually turns out to be his biological mother, so it's kinda messy.
Hey, Mom. Why'd you give birth to me?
But as a consequence of this relationship, he had access to contraband, which he would disassemble and upcycle into a device which can disable the trackers in their ear. And when the time was right, Ray set up for Emma and Norman to sneak out to the outer gate and discover the truth for themselves. Why did he do this? Well, because Ray loved Emma and Norman, and he wanted them to survive as well. And so when Emma and Norman find out, Emma is in complete denial of what she saw, whereas Norman is horrified but accepts the reality of the situation. He starts to think selfishly and only wants him, Ray, and Emma to survive, but Emma's thinking about all the children in Gracefield. She wants all of them to survive this conundrum. When he sees her in this situation, and given that Norman has a little thing for Emma, he agrees with her and helps her in her decision. But Isabella quickly finds out there are children other than Ray that know the truth. So now it's a game of cat and mouse. Emma, Ray, and Norman versus Isabella. I honestly don't think that I could do season 1 justice by summarizing the plots of the episodes here, because the mind games, the strategies, and the manipulation which goes on is fantastic. Highly recommend for any of you that like mystery thrillers, Christopher Nolan or M. Night Shyamalan level of intensity. But essentially, there's a lot of pain, suffering, hurt, and sacrifice on the kids' behalf, which makes sure that 13, not all, of the kids manage to escape Gracefield Farm. And it ends with them looking at the sunrise, a new start in a world full of monsters. The theme of free will versus predestination is in the forefront when looking at the Promised Neverland. One can see that the initiation of the farms was for the sake of world peace and in favor of humanity. But there was a need for sacrifice. Further, if fear of death was a factor at the start, aka the kids were privy to the truth, then their brains wouldn't develop to their full potential, and consequently the product would be of a lower quality, which doesn't guarantee that the monsters would have that level of intelligence to maintain the peace between the human and the demon world. Instead, the bigger illusion of freedom given to the kids is better for their development, thus produces a higher degree of safety for the humans living in the human half of the world. So, as well as the fact that you have the entire issue of how we treat animals, aka pasture raised, organically fed, free range animal rights, it also has a lot to do with what we perceive giving humans freedom versus the peace of the world. I mean, as humans that do consume animals, we believe that this illusion of freedom for the animals is a form of mercy because we've already determined the fate of the animal. So letting it live a happy life beforehand is an act of compassion. Plus, it's economical because all these morally guilty people would be more inclined to purchase these products. For the humans that made the contract with the monsters, this is the exact same thing. Giving the kids the best quality of things makes them happy and enjoy life, as well as enhancing the quality of the product, which significantly guarantees the safety for the other humans. Plus, not letting the kids live a long life, just up to 12 years old, is also an act of mercy, as it only lets them experience an eighth of their normal lifespan, which means that they haven't experienced too much of the world for us to be saddened by their sacrifice. But is it not the right of the children to choose to survive if they wish? Is it not the right of the children for them to pick whether they want to live a hard and harsh life or death? Well, yeah. And so it's this dichotomy which is discussed in the series. However, unfortunately, due to the downfall of season 2, it means that the true discussion with regards to this dilemma can only be seen discussed in the manga, which is out of the scope of today's analysis, although we'll try to infer a few things here and there. Instead, we'll primarily look at season 1 as a standalone story. So the story of the children that discovered that they are prey and what they're going to do about it, instead of the story of this monstrous world which sacrifices children for the sake of survival. And so to do that, we've got to look at the first victims of the system that we are introduced to. It's not the 3 kids, it's Isabella. Yes, Isabella was a child of Gracefield House herself, and after her best friend was taken away, Isabella couldn't handle it anymore. And so she decided that she was going to run away and live her life with her best friend, not wanting to be adopted. However, in her escape attempt, she finds out part of the truth. There wasn't a world outside for them. Now here, this is where the previous mother of Gracefield House comes to Isabella and provides her with a choice. She didn't have to be food, but she would have to be a mother herself, living the rest of her life in Gracefield. Isabella accepted this offer. She wanted to save only herself. And so she became part of the suppressive system, part of the world where she would be the one sacrificing the kids that she would raise, including her own biological son, Ray. Not only that, her failure to escape makes it so that she doesn't want anyone else to be able to do it. When she finds out some of the kids have found the truth, she does anything in her power to try and subdue their thoughts, to make sure they stay in the farm long enough for them to be harvested. And when it came to the escape attempt, she tried her best to catch them. It was only until when they did escape that she finally let go. Now, this is contrary to Sister Krone, who was introduced to Gracefield House due to these kids finding out the truth. Isabella had called for reinforcements in attempt to subdue their curiosity and scare them into submission. However, Sister Krone is also smart, and so she wanted to do her own thing so that she herself could get recognition, become a mother, and guarantee her survival. However, when testing the kids, she found that they are
truly elite.
And so she actually started to give them information that they wanted and help them in their escape attempt. Now, of course, this got under Isabella's skin, so Krone needed to be done with. But it shows us a parallel between the two of them. Both saw potential in the children, but where one wanted to subdue that potential because of her own failure, the other wanted to help them escape, wanted to give them their own life and their own choices.
You brats better succeed, you hear me? Run away. Escape. Survive this, and then destroy this awful world we live in! Well, Ray, I did it to survive. Longer than anyone. I guess that's it then. It looks like I've lost.
Another huge difference between Isabella and Krone is their genuine ability to mother. Now, Krone doesn't have experience, so it was a bit more obvious, to say the least, that she had a second agenda in mind. But Isabella, she was good at hiding it and actually developing feelings for the children. However, she had practiced and practiced to become devoid of letting that emotional bond cloud her judgment. She had become a robot, a slave to the system. The only connection that Isabella has to her own humanity and her own life is her lullaby. And this is what happens to people who strive to survive, who allow corruption to continue so that they won't become a victim of the system. But consequently, they are, first and foremost, the victims, and secondly, the tyrants that become the hands of a corrupted system. Now, if we draw parallels to what happened after World War II, then we can see that Isabella is a really good comparison to what we're seeing in the modern world. When the Balfour Declaration was signed 107 years ago, it did not have the people of Palestine in mind. We had a crisis which followed the Holocaust, and it needed to be solved. And then comes a corrupted colonial system which offers that hand to allow them to survive. Of course, for their own sake and safety, they took it, but it was at the expense of another people. Now these people, they let them live amongst them. However, they weren't part of the imperial and colonial system. And so when it came to the revolutions and the independence that these nations wanted after the downfall of imperialism, this became impossible for the people living in the land that we know as Palestine. And the reason why we cannot take away that issue is because when the people of Israel were brought to Palestine, their only security that they had was the imperial system. Removing that and giving the rights to the Palestinian meant bringing insecurity and stripping the power from these Holocaust survivors. And so, instead of doing the right thing and actually giving everyone their own free will and choice, they decided to side with the old and existing unjust system to keep their own security. And so we continue to have the injustice taking place, just as Isabella decided to side with the corrupt system, and how she became the enemy of the children of Gracefield House. As we can see from the Promised Neverland, not every single mother or sister going through the system are emotionally devoid. Like Krone, there are people that were brought and raised in the imperial system that actually see the humanity of the people living in Palestine and are willing to help them. just as Corona was willing to help the children. And they are everywhere, and we stand with them. But what is it that Corona saw in the children that made her believe in hope again, made her want to see change to a corrupted system? Well, let's look at it. First, in Ray. Ray, he has the ability to solve every problem that he puts his mind to. He knows the truth from the very beginning, and he's been working on it his entire life. Ray is a manifestation of human instinct. In our instinct, we all know the truth. We all hold that, and it's shared in humanity. However, the way that it looks and manifests in the modern world, that is something that we need to learn and navigate. Just as Ray was trying to learn and navigate how the truth that he knows looks like in the world. But as Corona points out, Ray's biggest weakness is that he's quick to give up. And this doesn't come because he's given up on trying to survive, but that he starts to ration and reason his resources. He starts to realize that things that he wished and wanted are outside his capability. The harsh reality of the world is too hard for him to handle on his own. We see Ray lose hope in himself due to this, and due to seeing so many of his siblings being taken away before he had the capability to save them. It's not his fault. I mean, he's still 11 years old. That's a huge responsibility to have on a 11-year-old's shoulder. So, of course, he's going to feel these mixed emotions inside, and that he wants to punish himself for not being able to rescue every child that was taken away to be harvested. And it's this mixture of guilt and realism which makes Ray the way that he is. Emma, on the other hand, she is the positive light of the group. She is the one that cannot see herself leaving any of the children behind. And this is far before she knew the truth. Emma's long dream was to become the mother of Gracefield House. She wants to look after the children her entire life. She has a big heart, and that is what Emma is in the group. She is the heart. She is the one that keeps everyone beating. She's the extrovert, the happy, chirpy, cheerful self that she is, which keeps everyone alive. And so we find that when she discovers the truth, she's in absolute denial. She doesn't want to believe that all her friends, her brothers, her sisters were gone for good. And it's this absolute positivity and the fact that she draws her energy from the people around her which keeps Emma going and never gives up. She's a hard worker. She keeps going with the plan to make sure that she can do the right thing and help everyone at the end. As Corona says, Emma's biggest weakness is her vanity. She sacrifices herself for others. She doesn't think rationally for the sake of others, and she uses her heart over her mind when it comes to making these emotional decisions. And sometimes that's a pitfall. But luckily, she has Norman to straighten things out. Norman is the mind of the group. We can see that from his reaction of the truth.
I'm afraid it was Connie.
Logical. He was the thinker, the planner, the person who ends up helping Emma formulate the plan. She took the blueprints that Norman gave her and the distraction that Ray had made to plan the escape. But Norman, he does everything for the sake of the heart, because the heart is what keeps him alive. And so he has to make sure that she survives, because if she survives, then he will too. And thus, he ends up sacrificing himself for the sake of the plan working, for the sake of Emma's survival. And this is also part of his weakness. As Krone says, Norman's biggest issue is his feeble body, his inability to do everything for himself, and the fact that he needs others to help him out. It was Norman who suggested that they would require other people in the planning team, the 10-year-olds, Don and Gilda. Now, Don was super important because he's the muscle of the group, whereas Gilda, she's the insulation. Now, you're probably thinking this is all kind of weird, but think about it from a human body's perspective. Norman is the mind. Ray is the bones. Emma is the circulatory system in the heart. Now, you require the rest of the organs, which are made of two different types of tissue, muscle tissue and fat tissue, and therefore you require the two of them so that the body functions perfectly. Don, he was the one who basically did a lot of the heavy work. He's the one who helped all the other kids train their bodies so that they are able to escape. Whereas Gilda, not only was she a huge emotional support for Emma, but she was also the one who was preparing all the other children for the escape too, coddling them, making sure that they don't show any sign of emotion to Isabella when she walked past, now that they know the truth. At this point of the series, they hadn't really discovered the truth of the world around them, so they didn't know about the promise 1,000 years prior, but their human will was speaking to them, and it was objecting to the fact that they would not be able to make their own choices in the future. Whether it would be the most difficult thing and then they would want to wish to come back, they still wanted to have that experience, and it is in their right to. No person should be denied their human rights to choose, nor should any group of innocent people be sacrificed for the greater good, which is a false equivalency anyway, because you don't know what the potential of these kids are. If you let that potential flourish, then maybe they are the greater good instead. Denying the existence of the potential in these kids and making them the sacrifice to maintain a current existing world isn't the greater good for humanity. But of course, breaking what exists, even if it was made unjustly, means insecurity and means rebuilding the world from scratch, which is a very scary thing for many people. So it's easier to keep the oppressed and maintain the same system which exists than to accept their humanity and actually bring suffering to your own life to get them to the same stage that you are. It's a selfish resolution, but when it comes to survival, that's what humans are. Given that this anime looks at everything from the side of the children of Gracefield House, it's actually really good for us to understand what the people living under a oppressed system are feeling and siding with their will and want to find happiness for themselves. So yeah, this anime is not for kids by any means. But other than that, season 1 of the Promised Neverland is near perfect by my standards. I like most of the characters, the pacing and the suspense are immaculate, and you don't need to like anime to enjoy it. It doesn't have that really annoying like anime humor past episode 1 or 2. It's an anime that takes itself seriously, which makes the audience take it seriously as well. Again, I highly recommend season 1. It's definitely an anime that needs some love after season 2 kind of destroyed its popularity. So, the Promised Neverland, a huge metaphor to the current life that we're living in. The question of free will spans beyond the political landscape and touches each of us. Because we all live in some kind of system which will restrict us in one way or another, from social struggles to physical desires or cultural rulings. We all seek to jump the wall and to decide happiness for ourselves. And that is what makes us human. If you want to watch season 1, you can use the link which is in the descriptions, or any kind of streaming platform that doesn't support the violation of human rights or the spread of negativity in the world. And also don't forget, there is a link for creators for Palestine. So if you have a spare moment, a humble donation would be greatly appreciated and rewarded. God and the universe never turned a blind eye to generosity. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know if you would like more anime content in the future in the comments below. But anyhow, next week we'll be getting back to our usual content, so make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out. And be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.